Jess?
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah, again, for anyone who we might want to share this with, or yeah.
Okay, great. So we're recording now. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for being here. My name is Ann Pfister. I'm Associate Professor of Anthropology here at the University of North Florida and Director of the Digital Humanities Institute, or DHI. The DHI, as we know, promotes collaboration on interdisciplinary projects that combine the use of technology with materials and methodologies from the humanities, fine arts, and social sciences and related fields. The DHI is composed of faculty and students across UNF. It is an intercollegial institute bringing together student and faculty interests and expertise through a variety of venues, including tonight's discussion. So as Jessica was about to say, this past summer, DHI sponsored funding. We provided funding for colleagues and students to attend University of Pennsylvania's Dream Lab. Tonight's presentation will discuss two different workshops within Dream Lab, which has an open call, I believe, now too. When I went to the website, it looked like they were at least starting to formulate next summer's events. So I'm looking forward to hearing what our colleagues learned there, and I'll turn it over to you, Jess.
Okay, great. I figured, Susan, would you like to start? And then I'll go into mine and then Jordy's. Okay, so Susan, I also have your presentation set up here. So what I'm going to do, Susan will share this screen with me briefly, and then I'm going to go ahead and screen share. And I'm sorry about what that invariably will be sometimes in this, is then we can go ahead and start the presentation, and you'll just toggle that way.
Right.
Okay, thank you, Susan.
Thank you. So I'm the head of special collections and university archives here at UNF, and I'm also on the DHI advisory board. And they very kindly allowed me to go to the nuts and bolts of digital humanities project development. I went to that particular workshop because I wanted to learn more about how to start a DH project and the tools that would be useful to know and to get some hands-on experience. And I didn't have a specific project in mind, but I just wanted to learn more about digital humanities in general. So the 4-day workshop was divided into a day each for gathering data and sources, building and sharing projects, preservation and sustainability, and project and resource management. And the workshop was taught by librarians, which is speaking my language. So the first day we spent talking about data, what you need and how you're going to get it for a project. We talked a lot about what is data, how to gather data, how to evaluate sources of data and data formats. We discussed documenting data creation, where it was found, how it was created, what steps were taken to gather it, and basically how you would be able to recreate or find the data again. And then finally, we talked about data management and data cleaning. And at the end of each day, we went around the room to highlight our most important takeaways of the day. And after day one, these were my most important takeaways. That data is a representation of the real world. Ideally, data is preserved, reproducible, documented, and managed. And data must be machine readable for a DH project, of course. And ways to get data would be to create it yourself, download plain data text files from data repositories, such as Chronicling America or Project Gutenberg, and web scraping APIs. So day two, we spent talking about some of the tools available to help build projects. We first worked on a web scraping exercise using an app called XPath Helper. We discovered that text mined by web scraping can help you draw new interpretations and conclusions, discover patterns and deviations, and to examine relationships between documents and related entities. And other tools that we looked at included Voyant Tools, Bookworm, and Gale DS Lab. We also discussed using Trifecta Checkup as a tool for evaluation and visualization by asking questions such as what is the question? What does the data say? What does the visual say? It allows you to think of ways to make the visualization of data more effective. Then we used the Palladio app as an exercise to see the different ways data sets could be visualized, such as maps, graphs, tables, and gallery. We talked about a number of tools that could be used for different formats. So we talked about WordPress as a website builder, Their Story for oral histories, StoryMap.js for story maps, Timeline.js for digital timelines, Omeka for digital exhibits, and Scalar for multimodal research. We learned about some digital mapping tools that show representations of space displayed as an image with data. Spatial data can include spreadsheets or CSV files, paper maps, shape files, or aerial imagery. And the tools can include Esri, ArcGIS Online or Pro, StoryMap, Google Earth, QGIS, StoryMap.js, OpenStreetMap, and Palladio. And throughout the day, we played with some of these tools to give us some insight as to how they could be used in DH projects. We also delved into tools that would aid with accessibility of a website, including Website Content Accessibility Guidelines, WCAG, Web Accessibility Evaluation Tool, or WAVE, WebAIM, a contrast checker for color contrast. And we spent some time talking about having the right tools for your projects and how to assess your options before investing time using them in a project. So some of the questions we learned to ask is who makes it? What are their interests? How stable is it? Is it being maintained? Is it free? Is it open source? And is it easy to use? The last one is the most important in my book, personally. So my most important takeaway for day 2 was that I was able to use that tool I talked about, XPath Helper app, to do a web scrape project. And with the app and a lot of help, I was able to mine some data from a static subject list on our UNF website to create a CSV file that I saved as an Excel spreadsheet. And it was a quick way to populate a spreadsheet rather than painstakingly typing everything into a spreadsheet item by item. And it gives you better, it's more accurate than if you typed it item by item as well. So on the third day, we learned about digital publishing platforms and talked about some of the different types of options and features each platform offers. Notably that free options usually had many limitations and the importance of choosing the right platform for the right project. So for example, she compared, the person giving the program compared Omeka with WordPress, saying that Omeka was built for digital collections and exhibits, whereas WordPress started as a blogging platform, and they both might be used as a different way of creating a website, but they would turn out differently, and it depends on what your ultimate goal is. We also discussed the pluses and minuses of static versus dynamic websites. Static websites load quicker, but are coder-centric, and dynamic websites change with your content and can be more engaging, but are expensive. We talked about website hosting options and the things to consider to share your online presence, such as accessibility, findability, and usability, as well as structure and organization of your website and search engine optimization. We discussed concerns about maintaining and preserving your website. For instance, who has access to your website, and making sure that you back up the active copy of your website in case of any kind of digital disaster, and preserving former copies when you make major changes so you can always go back and review them. And we learned about the University's of Pittsburgh's Sustainability Roadmap, a tool to help guide sustaining a DH project over time. My day 3 takeaway was understanding the importance of asking and answering the most basic questions. How are people going to find my website? Who's the core audience and what keywords will direct them to my story? How is my information unique and distinct? What topics or themes are known or popular that my website connects to? On the 4th day, we talked a lot about project management, and we learned the 4 steps of project management: initiating, planning, implementing, and then closing the project. We reviewed websites with information to assist in structuring and managing a DH project. We looked at the Start a Project website by the Yale DH Lab, Project Management for Digital Humanities by Emory University. And then we read an article by Ashley Reed in DH Quarterly called Managing an Established DH Project. Then we spent a very short time talking about some grants and funding sources from federal, state, and private sources. And finally, we learned some tips for writing final reports for your grants and funding, showing why your work matters and the impact it has, your project has on your community, highlighting your accomplishments, and did your project meet your goals? How this project's funding might leverage other funding opportunities, acknowledging challenges or setbacks, and then talking about the next steps. So my most important takeaway for day 4 was when you're managing a project, you can have 2 of the following 3 things. It can either be fast and cheap, cheap and well done, or fast and well done. And to keep that in mind when you're planning your project. So I'm not a techie person, and I looked at DreamLab as an opportunity to learn what types of tools might be available. The 4 days I spent in this workshop went by so fast, and so much information was provided that it's really hard to distill it down to just 10 minutes. And I found it really worthwhile. So if anybody is considering going and you think you don't know anything about DH, this is the program for you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Susan. All right. So Jordyn and I attended quite a different part of the Dream Lab, where in which we really looked at content surrounding surrounding kind of an extension coming off of ideas around Black Afrofuturism, and to think about Black speculative futures. And so our group really had a lot of readings, a lot of discussions that then led to projects that were built out, but in no way, shape, or form needed to be, say, complete. So I'm going to go through my presentation here. Okay, so I also want to note, this was really my work for some of you that knew what I was kind of working on last year and presented a bit about at the Florida Digital Humanities Conference, is that I'm really interested in, well, basically what we're having here, which is like mending the fissures of the physio-digital divide. So even in the context of this event, some of us are in person and sitting in front of the screen, and basically that these don't have to be like binaristic forms, and that we can really we can actually think about this in really expansive ways, and kind of push against the algorithms and global capitalism in kind of building community in different ways using the tools that are given to us. I'll get into that in a second. So this kind of, as I was coming out of it, this course examined Black speculative futures from an interdisciplinary lens. Each participant came to the program with unique backgrounds and skill sets to unpack shared material and develop projects that amplified their own scholastic, activist, and creative strategies. So what that was kind of laid out for us was the two designers of the class created a Google Classroom, although I think it was actually Google Sites that they used. We had a pre-course exercise, daily activities, readings, and this leading toward project development. And let's just see, it is sharing on my screen. Okay, perfect. So this is what they developed out for us. Was this really great? I think this is actually Google Sites. So what's kind of cool about the way they did it is they kind of gave us an example from the beginning of class of like ways in which our projects could look. So we have this really great workshop overview, goals, our facilitators who, the other thing that was really great was Michael and Clayton were also working on projects alongside us. So it was a very like co-learning environment. No one had like one, no one was like the leader in a way. We were all kind of like working through these readings and materials together, giving feedback together about our projects. And I'm actually just going to go through, because again, what I think is really cool, right, is I can come back, because as Susan mentioned, this week it was so much stuff. We were at Dream Lab from 9 to 5 p.m. every day. It was very intensive. And what that means is, maybe we got excited or confused. But what's really nice is that I can actually come back to this website. I'm sharing this website with you all again and again, and it's archived here. And in this, each day had its own site. These were kind of more open-ended, things, but what was also really great is it looks like, boom, you can still have access to all these readings. So this was really cool because I think that the platform that was being used was exemplifying some of the topics that we were, discussing. It was actuating some of these topics. And so each of these, and I can drop this in the chat. Each of these daily activities has that same folder, takes you to the readings, takes you to all of the things that we were working on each day. And so, yeah, and I have hyperlinks to those separate there. So through daily textual discussions alongside building interactive and aesthetic material that may not align with our shared and individuated reflections and ideas. Therefore, the goal was not a final project, but curiosity, a time space for imagination, and an attempt to physicalize that which we wish to add to our world building. So as I mentioned, everyone that was in the group was already thinking through some projects, was already kind of coming to the table with things that they were dealing with. And so the readings became the shared language that we could operate under during the week. But then our projects really took on and reflected the things that we were each doing in our own field. And so the fellows, as I mentioned, it's kind of a co-working and feedbacks kind of zone that we were in. Came from backgrounds which included anthropology, history, literature, design, and community strategies, art, curation, creative writing, English and literature, instructional design, and urban planning. Some fellows wore multiple hats, serving in academic and staff roles, as activists and community citizens, as parents, siblings, children, partners, and bikers, just to name a few. And so this also was very important to the group that we were in, is that we are bringing our whole selves to this week. Likewise, the projects that emerged employed video, a game developed around a syllabus, developed around a little Nas album, and like queer Black culture, digital collage, existential presentational models, websites, and digital mapping. And I'm just going to go a little bit into the project that this course really allowed me to shift into. So, so for the Florida Digital Humanities Conference, I presented this kind of first iteration of thinking basically through the hyperlink as citation and kind of trying to bring a digital viewer into the world that one might experience in a physical curatorial space, which is to say, we read text and image kind of in a side-by-side way. We can kind of move, when we're in a physical space, we can move our eyes along and we can build out relationships between disparate objects based on kind of how we encounter them. However, even if I'm kind of co-creating this in this way, it's still the blog and the scroll style format. What I had developed out, however, were things like, again, using the kind of like the ways in which we engage with online material. We click on something, it highlights, we click on that, and then it can take us, say, into about Adrienne Maree Brown, who was fundamental to some of the curatorial work that I was doing for this project. Likewise, you might float over something and you're like, what is this quote? And it takes you to a video of Grace Lee Boggs, who Adrienne Maree Brown has also pulled from her work to integrate into her practice. And so also thinking about lineages within feminist practice, but still a blog. So after DreamLab, I started to rethink this and developed a website that, as the viewer goes into the website, these are a bunch of curatorial projects that I've done. It allowed me to reflect on the why behind my curatorial work, why I like to curate group shows. What does that mean to me? What am I trying to establish when I do a group show? And it's about community. And it's about artists coming together, and then they kind of build out like an alumnus of themselves after they, work together. And so how do I honor that? And a lot of times with my group shows, it's not about me being front and center, but centering the artist, which is why you don't see my name on any of this. And if you look at the top, I just have this moniker, fissure mending. So my name is not there. The idea, and there's lots of questions to be addressed through what Susan brought up, which is, who is this audience for? Who, there's lots of questions there. But for right now, and coming out of DreamLab, designing this out to then reflect on those pathways. So I'll use one example because it's a free website right now, so I don't have all the non-free options to do this. Someone clicks on something, they learn a bit about the project, which is very typical when you look at exhibition projects. You click on an artist's name, you go to their website. However, what I also wanted to do was to include things that were a bit more exploratory and abstract. So you click on this, say, and it leads you to a text that Sky Hopinka did that is an extension of his work that is in connection to the video that we showcased at the gallery. But now as a user viewer, you can kind of learn a little bit more about what Sky does. Similarly, you click on here, and maybe some of you guys recognize this quote. It then takes you to Gloria Anzaldúa, and I also created a Google, like a Gmail account so that I could have a G drive under fissure mending, and then I could upload all these papers into it and then have free and open source sharing of like knowledge. And I know, Susan, you're looking at me, I'm sure this is not cool from a libraries person. Okay, cool. But the idea is that also, so if you go back to again, how am I honoring the artists that I'm working with? Well, this artist here actually was pulling from Gloria Anzaldúa to generate her work, as she is a Borderlands artist. And so again, in one way, it's like, okay, you can come up here and you can see Jessica Villegas, her work, right, her bio. But then again, some people may not be connected through text. They might be connected to play around through images and discover what's going on. We worked with local organization 90 Forward. 90 Forward does a lot. Then you click on Community of Remembrance and it takes you exactly to that project. So the idea, and doesn't exist now, but okay. But the point being is that it really, being able to have, I think in the workshop that we were in, just a week to think through new readings, new conversation with different people. It allowed me to reflect on something I had been problem solving, but now finding like a new avenue for, and utilizing a new digital tool to again, not just necessarily think about archive, but again, really like honoring, like I've been curating group shows for over 10 years. And so this would need to turn into like, I would need to take a probably sabbatical to completely like fill out this project in its entirety. I mean, some of the group shows I've done have been over 30 to 60 artists, and then creating those little veins and tributaries for all of them would take on a lot. But DreamLab allowed me to begin this process and to think through it seriously. Again, not as like an archive of what I've done, but an experimental way to rethink the curiosity that occurs and the community building that occurs in an exhibition space, and how to kind of reignite that or consider it in a digital atmosphere. So that's kind of what I was able to get. Oh yeah, so that's a screenshot. And then I'm just going to end with the text that I've been dealing with for the past like year and a half, which is Legacy Russell's Glitch Feminism. And a quote here that experimenting online does not keep us from our AFK means away from the keyboard selves, nor does it prevent us from cultivating meaningful, complex, collaborative communities beyond our screens. The production of these selves, the digital skins we develop and don online, help us understand who we are with greater nuance as a vehicle to rethink our physical selves. And so again, I'm kind of coming out of DreamLab now. We're almost 6 months out. And these are still things that I'm curiously and invigoratingly grappling with. But DreamLab, again, allowed that kind of just like week to go there and to be dealing with the theory and also the creative space and the physical space to work out some of that, to build upon a project or a way to rethink certain projects. So yeah, that's what I got. So I'm gonna bring it over to Jordie. And oh, there's also one thing I do want to share real quick. It's pretty amazing. And I think it's amazing. It's this like amazing tool for just everyday life, like maybe once a month doing this. So this is what we had to do. We were encouraged to do this like before we entered class. And just this like, it was like breath work. It was like just question asking, putting these together. It just so many great, like kind of a slow down reflection. How are we assessing this? How are we examining that? And then, so I also think they gave us a really great kind of, not like none of us were learning like how to put a website together, but we were, I think, also learning like project tools and ways of thinking tools. And I think that was also just so valuable for what we did. So this, I can also include this in like a zip. I think this also still might be on the website too, but okay, sorry, Jordie. All right, so now I'll let Jordie begin. Okay.
All right. Hello. So my perspective, my point in my position in the conference was a bit different because I'm still an undergrad and I'm also like an art student. So I was going into this completely in a sort of like creative mode. And then I kind of like ended up being in this like very academic, but also like very free flowing space. And so that was actually very beneficial because that became like the starting point for me to start thinking about my creative endeavors in an academic way, and also just seeing how I could like use academics and resources to inform, my creative processes. And ultimately, I'm coming to the conclusion that those things don't have to be as separate as we're constantly supposed to deem them, but they're actually okay. But they're actually can be very they could flow together. It's a very interdisciplinary process, as Jess touched on. So my notes, so this is this first slide is a picture of my notes, and this is essentially what my notes look like every day. One thing that we were super that was on the table a lot was about info sharing, and then also about this concept of linear time space and how we could disassemble that. So a lot of our conversations were very just like free flowing, and you kind of just got these bits and pieces of like gems. And we were doing a lot of just random talking about different writers, different sort of artists, anything that could provide us with enough resources to do what we were talking about. And so we were talking a lot about just sort of resistance and resistance to oppression through academics and creative processes. So we had like this death of a social structure, which I thought was very interesting to be tackling through this sort of info sharing that we were doing. And it all came down to this sort of like the idea of the archive, right? And how we can utilize the archive and sort of putting resources together for the purpose of sharing it with others to sort of like build our communities. And so what I really took away from that was essentially that I could use my own artistic vision as a way of archiving. And in that way, I can turn my art into something that's also academic and serves as a point of research and education. And so what I really, really enjoyed about this course in particular was that even though a lot of the folks in the room were very academic based and had a lot of knowledge as far as like books and, just like really academic texts, one thing that we were interested in was feeling as a primary mode of engagement. And that's something that's super important to me as an artist, because obviously I want to make people, feel things when they come upon the work. That's how I intend to educate, is through sensory points. So we then sort of like talked about how an interactive image can, or like making a collage can be also like a point of sensory, right? So how can we make an image something that is also emotional and educational? It's like it's a big bubble. And so really we were talking about how all of these things could show our capacity for imagination, and how like radical imagination is sort of how we see into the future. Okay. And so one of my takeaways from this is, one of the things that I started to do was put together these readers. And a lot of these, some of these works are directly from the stuff that we were reading from during the lectures, or I wouldn't call them lectures, during the class. And what I wanted to do was kind of use this in tandem with my actual visual work, as sort of as like a bibliography of sorts, as a way for people to reference the thoughts and the documents that go into these bigger projects that are not necessarily broken down specifically into words. So I put together these readers as points where you could directly just reference the ideas that are informing this work. And so when I go back, going back to the concept of disassembling linear time, this was really important, because one thing with linear time, what it does is it asserts that this person did this one thing at this point in time. But what we were concerned about was all the little feathers and tethers that happen around that one thing. So, any invention could be, patented by one person, but there are 1,000 other trials and errors that came before it. And who are those people? How are they thinking? And we saw that a lot with what Jess is doing as well. Jess is really concerned with building all these like micro worlds. And so that's essentially like what we're doing. It's a sort of activism in a way, by giving everyone their credit, and also just like fully building out the full vision of what's happening. Oh, okay, sorry. And then, so one of my other sort of projects was this video that I was working on, because as an artist, that's just my particular stance. I have like an instinct to want to create something, visual, or most directly experiential. And so one thing that came up was, how do I create an inclusive yet comprehensive archive that is Black and queer, and with emphasis on, Southern imagery at the time. But mostly I was just wanting to focus on, how can I create something that's inclusive and comprehensive, something that can be shared to, and translated back to my parents, And so I started creating this video that was basically a collage of different iconic moments that were all kind of stemming around Afrofuturism and the concept of Afrofuturism. And obviously, like, so the reader that I just presented would be shown in tandem with this. And so it essentially showed that, you know, like the readers in the video were my mode of archiving and as producing or like contextualizing this sort of radical imagination. And like through this, what I really was interested in was how this class kind of made me really interested in the relationship between digital media, academics, and the arts, and how those intersections could be really effective in building our communities. And so, yeah, I really took a lot away from this. Is actually was I feel like the beginning point for my current body of work. It really has like inspired me a lot because I learned so much academically, and I gained a lot of resources, and there was a lot of like just general info sharing within the class that gave me a solid foundation to sort of explore bigger and larger themes, not just Afrofuturism, but just larger themes around oppression and capitalism and all of the sort of issues that we're navigating currently, and how I might be able to move through those things through the digital humanities. So yeah, that's my take. Thank you.
Yeah. The stop screen share. Okay. Yeah, my mouse is crazy. Okay. So I guess at this point, if anyone has any like questions, we can also like take turns bouncing up to this screen to answer them or whatnot. Yeah.
What questions do we have for our friends and colleagues? Did anyone see the meme yesterday? It was I think it was do you know the website blank academics say? Blankety blank. Okay. At least one might see one person nodding their heads. Anyways, did you see the meme yesterday that was posted? It said, I'm just going to go ahead and carve my pumpkin with something that's really scary, and carved in there were the words, not so much a question, but a comment. That was what was carved on the pumpkin. So anyways, that was way to ruin a punchline, right? By this really super long and confusing lead up. I have a comment, which is to say a frightening comment. I just wanted to say, Jordyn, one of the things that DHI is so very proud to do, or at least I want to say this as the current director, but also as a member since I came to the university a number of years ago, the level of scholarship and work that our undergraduate students do is really, really impressive. And I'm an anthropologist on campus, as I mentioned earlier, and I don't often get a chance to work with art students unless they happen to take some of my classes, which happens on occasion. But I'm just so proud to hear the way that you're talking about your work and the way that you can come back and synthesize and incorporate that kind of information from a workshop. I don't know, although you could share with us if you wish, if you were the only undergraduate student, but you certainly don't sound like an undergraduate student talking about these things. And I mean that in the, in the nicest possible way. So I just really want to congratulate you. And one of the things I think that UNF does well, not just the DHI, is to give students these kinds of experiences with their faculty mentors, to really get to know someone and to use this language, because it's not off limits to undergraduate students, and you're an example of that.
Exactly. Thank you so much. But exactly, that's one of the main things that made me so happy, because also like this is a great opportunity. I was in a room with a bunch of like people with PhDs, like doctors, so like, and I was, I'm just like, yeah, I still have to graduate, like, so it was crazy, but it was also like very humbling for one. And two, it was also just very amazing to have the exposure and the proximity to that level of intelligence and grace. And just the exposure in general, being in a different city and a different university around different people who can offer you different experiences, that was truly just immeasurable. And like I said, like I truly mean it when I say that it gave me a very solid foundation, because I mean, it's just too much to even, the amount of authors, the amount of like writers and artists that I got exposed to within that small frame of time. I know it sounds like probably really cliche, but I did come back a completely different person. I did, like, it was that transformative. And it's only so much that you can really experience or like say through, like a PowerPoint and talking about, Afrofuturism and, but it did take on a more than an academic sort of, I'm in a class conference experience. It was like a fully immersive, fully transformative thing. So it was an amazing opportunity. And I think if anybody has the opportunity to do it, you should absolutely take it. Absolutely.
That's great. I mean, that's the other thing that I think about as I'm listening to you, is that a lot of undergraduate students aren't looking for or taking these kinds of opportunities, and because it's, on some level it's kind of like maybe perceived as a risk or whatever. But so anyways, I congratulate you.
Thank you. All.
You're welcome.
I also just want to put a shout out that Jordyn is going to have a solo exhibition at Yellow House that will open on December 3rd. So for those of you listening now or later, please come to Jordyn's opening, because Jordyn is going to be showing a lot of this stuff that they're working through. So I have to plug it.
Yeah. And let's make sure to publicize that on the DHI listserv and wherever else. And then also, Jordyn, I understand that you're graduating soon. So if you want to stay in touch through the listserv and other ways too, please keep us posted on what you're doing. Hi.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. What other questions or comments might we have?
I'm going to make this very short. I'm very congested, so I don't like talking right now. But I mean, I want to thank you and applaud all three of you for presenting. I think where my mind is right now, I'm a social work professor, so I'm very much people oriented in terms of working with intervention, so to speak. And so when I hear you all's presentations, especially Jordyn's, I'm thinking of ways that art can be infused in terms of like social work practice or intervention. And I think my mind is just trying to figure out how to disseminate such approaches and practices as the one that you presented to my undergrad students when they're thinking of like, well, how can I work with my clients, especially young people? And so I think I'm processing. But even in terms of social work education, at the beginning of class, like I do check-ins all the time using Google Jamboard, and that's like something very minute. But then I remember Jess's presentation, and it had like a lot of processing questions, but it used this digital component, right, to ask these questions. And so more than anything, I mean, of course, I want to thank you all, but your presentation has me thinking of ways to integrate some of these features into the classroom with my students, to engage with them in terms of their reflections, but also to train and coach them on how they can infuse art as a means for their social work practice as well. So I appreciate the presentations, and my wheels are turning. So that's always a good thing.
Absolutely. That's awesome. I feel like you do that a lot too, don't you?
What?
Or do you try to do like digital things that for your class?
Yeah, in the classroom, yeah.
But I actually been trying to do this a lot with like other work too. I work at Yellow House, which is a directly like art and community. That's like their main intersection. And so I think there are a lot of tools, and it's really just about knowing your audience and what they were like interact the most with. Like I know, like for me, like I'm a huge like Tumblr/Google kid. And so I have professors who would like go directly to Tumblr as a place for us to sort of like meet because it's it's easier, we understand it, and then we can kind of like check in on each other. And it also has a sort of like art house vibe about it. And so like people can kind of be creative in that way. But the cool thing about art and academics, I think, is that it doesn't have to take any one form or be on any one platform. It's just whatever works for you and your class. And I know that with our digital humanities course, they use Google Slides, Google Docs, Google Classrooms, because everybody has a Gmail account. And, and you can kind of just go ahead and go on it. You don't have to make an account. You don't have to do anything that's super annoying. And so I think I think that might be a really good like starting point, because it's easily accessible and you'd be able to jazz it up and make it as creative, appealing as you want. And while also inviting other people to add slides, add their own creative processes. And also just like as a way to introduce them to other things in a visual way, as opposed to something like a Google Docs, whereas they would have to like read and click links.
Yeah, so that I'll just jump in the frame with
Absolutely.
Jordyn. So that was also something I didn't show because we actually, as a group, we didn't really use it. But if you go to the Google Slides, which again, I'll like share, I'll just create a folder of all of our presentations with Anne. But what they did with the Google Sites is they also, you'll see at the bottom of the footer are our names that are supposed to be our project folders. And so then as a group, we could have been adding whatever material we wanted. And then that was stored, like if you click it and then it goes to like Google Drive. So that was another way that if we wanted to like, again, it wasn't like the methods that worked for us. I still have, it's somewhere here in the gallery because it's been weird today, but we also like did things where we had like, so they combine things like that with like, we all had like big, like, those white sticky notes. And so we can also like spatially draw that out. So we all kind of took to that. We didn't use the folders as much, but the folders were there as an option. And of course we could see each other's folders too.
Yeah.
So like, I think that Google Sites is, I really liked it as a user for that week. It seemed to be like pretty good because yeah, a lot of different like Google features could be on it. So, but yeah, if we had wanted to, we could have like dropped links into those folders and like images and yeah, all kinds of stuff.
Also on that note, one app that I like swear by is iScanner, because that actually allows me to take any physical media that I have and actually like scan it and digitally upload it with like no issues. So a large part of my actual process, whether it's my research or with my creative process, is I actually take from like books or notes that I've written down in other classes and artist talks, and I'll scan it and I'll move it to one spot, and I can kind of just have like a map of everything. And I feel like you would be able to use that for folks that you interact with that don't necessarily want to directly be on a device. So if they want to, write something out, if that's their form of, participation, or if that's just what they're comfortable with, you could have them like do an actual sketch, or you could have them write something out and then just scan it. And then it could live in its sphere and be there for reference later as like an archive of its own. Yeah. So does that help?
Yes, thank you.
What other comments or questions do we have? Hey, is it Andrea?
From Spanish, and thank you so much for your project. I think it was a very intense knowledge workshop, and I appreciate that showing all the methodology and all the resources that you learned with it. And this act of almost like democratization, right, of recovering that space, right? So I was just thinking about what are your next projects that you can tell us about, and also how do you make these settings already accessible, or how do you interact with groups that could make it or could enrich even more the project.
Yeah, I guess Susan, if you want to, like, have you started to build any projects since the Dream Lab?
No,
Okay,
I just jumped right into the semester and kind of lost track.
Yeah. but I think it was, I'll just enter the blank screen right now. I do think it was helpful, Susan, to, like, if you don't mind, I want to share your PowerPoint too, because you did share like a ton of tools that that I think are really useful, that I assume that they'll do the nuts and bolts again next year. Like it does seem like a good like overall workshop.
I would hope that they would do something.
Yeah. Or yeah, I even thought about, like, again, data visualization projects with, you know, certain topics in art or things that you want to discuss in art, but having data visual, you know, like just helps that. But yeah, I think, yeah, and I think certain, I'll also say this about, because we all got to see, so at the end of the Dream Lab, there was basically these like really, everyone kind of presented on like what they worked on for the week. And so I think something else that was useful, to go to your point, is that not only like we were kind of like the group that did way more kind of like theory and stuff, and like, but there was also like a group that talked about like, again, just like different like tools that they now have that allow like research to happen in a more democratic fashion, because people can have access to, say, manuscripts or objects that maybe they couldn't do to new tools in the field. I think like there was ways of, people did have like smaller projects where they were working on like what certain data in like data importing, what that can then give you. And so I think that's another cool thing about Dream Lab, is that there's a lot of different options for you to jump into. You do pick one for the week. So you do pick one and you're like, that's the one I'm in for the week. But at the end, you get to learn what like everyone else was working on, and kind of, you know, even if you decided one, you might, look at another tool and be like, oh, dang, and like jot that down and think, okay, we need to get that here, or how do we explore that further? So I think, like some were not necessarily so like project oriented, but rather getting acquainted with tools that can then assist you with a project that you have in mind. And then when you start thinking about that project, you can then refer back to, oh, there's like 10 different ways I can do this. And I think, as Susan kind of summarized, there are 3, like, what are the combos that you need to then address your project? And I think Dream Lab does a good job with introducing folks to these different routes. I would say. But yeah, it is an intense week, but I think really fulfilling, like really, really fulfilling. Yeah. But I think for me, I'm still trying to work out some of these like concepts. Again, I think this is interesting right now, and is definitely certainly something that I'm thinking about with this, you know, physio digital spaces that we're all occupying. So for me, it's like an ongoing thought exercise, but also working through these things curatorially or in the classroom. So I will also say, like, I created Professor Borusky Instagram in order to just, as Jordyn was saying, like meet students which platforms they're on. Professor Borusky Instagram, it's private because I also show some student work for the students, but I've also used the highlights reel to keep calls for art, job opportunities, local Jacksonville art things, and highlights reel, you can keep them in perpetuity. So I also refer back to it when I'm like, oh, remember I showed that space? And students will be like, oh, what artist? Go to the highlights reel and you can see all that. So now I'm like, I'm using that platform in concert with my classes right now. It does add another thing you have to do. I'm not going to lie. I mean, look at how crazy I look right now. Like
but it also meets them where they are, like in terms of technology. So
and it's like, if you're going to be scrolling on Instagram, maybe you can see some cool art I'm going to show you, or like check out, like if you forgot to take a photo of the thing you did in class today, I didn't. And so here it is. And then you can screenshot it and have it and, not forget that you did it. So yeah.
Which is another reason for incorporating students and undergraduate students into some of these workshops as experts, right? Because they are experts, as we know from anthropology and ethnography. So Susan, I have a question that's like a little bit DHI directorship question, but I wanted to thank you for all of your presentations. We really appreciate it. And it sounds like what we're trying to, one of the things that we're trying to do with the Tools and Training Committee is maybe make, the reason I'm not putting this into an email with you afterwards is because I want to kind of gauge from folks if this would be useful to them. My sense is that it would be. We've got some kind of DHI or DH tools that we're going to clean up and put on the website so that folks, for example, many of our new faculty are here because the directors often send out an email blast inviting them to come see what DHI is about. When I started on faculty in 2015, I'd never heard of the digital humanities. I didn't necessarily see my project as being digital humanities. All of this is to say that we would like to have kind of a DHI toolkit kind of thing on our website so that those faculty can say, oh, well, what is this all about? And, what kinds of things, not just what kinds of projects are faculty already doing, but what sort of support do I have? So that's the first part. If maybe we could talk about working together with the Tools and Training Committee to, if you think that would be a useful way to share some of the things that you've learned with faculty.
I am not a techie person, so I can try to help as much as possible.
Yeah, no, not so much the tech part of it, but just, these kinds of, what are these, like, I had never heard of some of the programs, some are software, they sounded mostly like software to me, that these are available. And then the second part of that question, question is, we have right now we're trying to outfit the DHI Media Lab. So if any of these things might fit under, that call for equipment and or software, keep that in mind, everybody. Like if you heard something in Susan's presentation that's like, oh, I would really like that for my project. Or Susan, if you have a sense of what people would really probably need or use that we might not have access to, just kind of keep that in mind. I'm just going to plug the DHI Media Lab call again.
Yeah, I think a lot of the tools were, right tool for the right project.
Yeah.
And really doing some of that careful, when I was talking about looking at how who benefits from the tools, are they open source, are they free, all of those different things are part of your decision-making processes as to what it is that you're trying to accomplish and what tool would be the best for that. And then looking at your budget and looking at, your final project, it's all part of that same thing. So it's hard to say that any 1, 2, or 3 tools would be the best ones to get. It's almost like you would want to say, we would have like an open-ended budget for ideas for what is going to work for a specific project, and then having people recommend what it is they're trying to do, and then maybe work through that process, that whole kind of checklist of what is it that you're trying to accomplish, how are you trying to accomplish it. And that might be more beneficial than trying to pick out specific tools, is picking out or putting together some sort of like outline or checklist that you could use to determine what the best tool for you is, because new things are coming out all the time. We did this 6 months ago. There are probably new things out there now that weren't available then, or they might be tools that were available that were free that you now pay for, or you paid for and are now free, depending on what the situation is and when you're talking about it. So I think that might be a better thing to do than to try to specifically highlight platforms or software.
Great. Just if there are any parts of your presentation, the work that you've already done, certainly not to put you as the point person of like, hey, call Susan if you're thinking about putting together a DH project. That wasn't the intention at all. Anyways, we appreciate that it's a lot of information that you all have kind of condensed down for us this evening, and in the middle of a busy semester, a busy week, and a busy.
Jordyn has a comment.
Just one quick thing.
Oh yeah.
Sorry.
Just one quick thing, because this is really important. I feel like, especially as you guys build out the DHI lab, a lot of things that were really useful, like story maps and even Prezi, you hit a paywall after a very like a significant point. So it's
Yes.
not even like, you could develop a full project and then you may not be able to do the next one. I was running into roadblocks like very early on, because like, and I always like, bring up my artistic sort of background, but my vision of certain things, I couldn't fully execute because there were all these things that you had to unlock. And a lot of the subscriptions were like hundreds of dollars. And this was one thing where I was like, the institution, like if we were actively using this would be something that we could we could actively use. I know that there was a UPenn, she was on the UPenn faculty at the time, and she could use story maps super effectively because she already had it in her program. She developed an entire like activist tour around Philly.
She did that fast too.
Incredibly fast. Yeah, she did it really fast.
That last day that we got to see,
Mhm.
that was really put together, yeah.
Yeah. She
I know, and that's something we've been talking about doing. DHI has been talking about doing
Mhm.
for years, actually. Okay, awesome.
And I mean, Prezi is like, it's coming back, I guess. I
Okay.
would like for it to come back, but it's also like $100. And so certain things like that. And I think that's where like using Instagram and social media is a nice way to get around that, because those are free access tools. But in that, you don't have the ability to kind of design it the way that you could with these other forms. So just taking that into account as you build out the lab.
Great, thank you. That's helpful. Thanks.
Yeah. That's a good, yeah, she was able to like do that real fast because she
Yeah.
had UPenn paid for it, so. Yeah, and the question is, because like, I feel like I'm forgetting, how did we go about the process of applying and doing Dream Lab?
Oh, I put a call out in the spring for like summer professional development funds, which I hope to be able to do again this spring for summer.
So Andrea, I think what we did was we had to put together, like, we had to send over the why it was important for us to
Yep.
to go, and yeah.
It was a pretty simple process, right?
Yes, it was, yes.
Yeah. So yeah, well, we hope to do that again. I mean, this is certainly a testament to why it was useful for these folks. And I think it's probably time. I hear pantries opening and other things
Yeah.
in my kitchen.
Yeah.
I have some free range children in there right now. So I thank everybody again for your time this evening. As I said earlier, during a busy semester, a busy week. If there are no more questions, should we?
Yeah.
All right.
And Anne, I'll send you probably tomorrow at this point, because we're still at the gallery and I need to like get home.
Yeah,
but
I know. It's a long day.
By the end of this week, I'll get you over the folder with all of our presentations, and also including the presentation for those like guiding questions that we had. So I'll put all that together for you.
Everything was really useful. Thank you very much. Thanks to everybody. And have a wonderful evening.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thanks.